The LA fires were like a scene from an apocalyptic movie made in that city. On YouTube, I watched flurries of flaming embers travel in massive numbers like a snow flurry of red hot flakes traveling down the street, lighting other houses and structures on fire. I watched fire departments have to pass up burning buildings because they were prioritizing some buildings over others, and they simply didn't have the resources to get to all of the structure fires. So some buildings just burned to the ground. A Wall Street Journal article that I read said that the excess fuel on public lands helped to make this fire a lot worse than it otherwise would have been. There was simply a failure by public officials to reduce the amount of fuel, the amount of vegetation that existed on that land, that public land, in order to ensure that fires wouldn't be as uncontrollable as they otherwise would be. The article said that in the Palisades, the city and county of Los Angeles, the State Parks Department, the California Coastal Commission, and the National Park Service all have a say in what happens on land surrounding residential areas. Better maintenance of the wildlands could have slowed the fire's growth, providing critical time to first responders and evacuees. This is all quoting from the Wall Street Journal article. The article goes on to say that the delays were caused by a slow-moving tangle of government agencies that own or regulate Los Angeles' undeveloped land and are tasked with mitigating wildfire risks. And that's from an article in the Wall Street Journal called How LA Bureaucracy Made It Harder to Clear Flammable Brush and Mismatch of Government Agencies Failed to Keep Public Lands Safe from Deadly Wildfires, residents say. And that's the Wall Street Journal by Jim Carlton, Mark Maramont, and Dan Frosch, January 18th, 2025. What could have prevented or at least mitigated these fire disasters in the future? What could help prevent that in the future? I assert that it's more private property rights. That will unlock people's enlightened self-interest to prevent fire. The Wall Street Journal article even says that it was in the self-interest of people living near these public lands to want to try to mitigate the fire risks, but they were not allowed to do so due to state and federal law. And this is quoting from the Wall Street Journal article again. Quote, impatient with government bureaucracy, including a $150 fee for permission to remove brush from state parkland, some neighbors cleared it on their own. And that's that same Wall Street Journal article again. Rational selfishness means taking the actions necessary for maintaining your life. When it comes to material items, that means being able to take action to gain the food, clothing, and shelter, or to create the food, clothing, and shelter that you need in order to live. Property rights define and legally sanction your freedom of action to produce those material values that you need in order to maintain your life, in order to be rationally selfish. Property rights, in other words, or in sum, protect your rational self-interest from interference by other persons or government. Everyone and no one owned this public land in California. No one had an incentive to clear vegetation that was a fire risk. No one had the right or the responsibility to remove these fire hazards. So the solution to this problem is to privatize these public lands. The details will vary on a case-by-case basis. It will require action by legislatures and courts to work all of the details out. In the case of public parks, it probably makes sense for the surrounding landowners to get ownership of those parks. They would then have the same rights and responsibilities as any other landowner. That means they would have the right to build on it, they would have the right to sell it, and they would have the right to prohibit others from entering it except on the terms that they set. But with the right of ownership would also come the responsibility to maintain that land in a suitable state. The failure of a landowner to keep it safe, to keep that land from becoming a fire hazard, would subject him to legal liability. He could get sued. If a fire starts on that property because he didn't clear the vegetation properly, then people on surrounding land whose structures or buildings are damaged as a result of that fire could file a lawsuit for damages against him in court. In addition to that, they could preemptively file for what's called injunctive relief against that landowner in order to force him to mitigate that fire nuisance. In conclusion, this is not the whole solution to the problem of the fires that occurred in LA this year. Other solutions probably include privatized cities and fire departments, prohibiting vagrants from lighting campfires and other warming fires, and ending DEI for fire departments and city mayors and other personnel, and hiring on the basis of merit and not on the basis of race or gender or sexual orientation or any of these other completely irrelevant criteria. Merit should be the sole criterion for hiring. But privatizing public land is a piece of this puzzle.